everyone, welcome to Pit Stops To Podium, the RevPartners podcast, where we talk to execs who have competed and won, taking their companies from high growth to high scale. My name is Brendan Tullison. I serve as the co-founder and CEO of RevPartners, and I'm delighted to have with me today Andrew Goldner of GrowthX. Welcome, Andrew.
Thank you, Brendan. I am super grateful to be here with you and your audience.
Well, I think I'm supposed to call you my liege, if I recall. So make sure I
hey,
get
you
that
weren't
right.
supposed to say that while we were recording. That was between us. Now I'm going to get loads of shit from my partners.
Yeah, sorry, that was in confidence. I did sign an NDA, so I need to be careful what I say during this. Just teasing. But Andrew, for those that don't know who GrowthX or don't know who you are, I'd love for you to give a little introduction on the company, and then we'll get into a little bit of your background and who you are outside of work. So who's GrowthX?
Yeah, so GrowthX, we're a venture capital fund. We're investing in rising city founders in North America. And first we help and then we invest. So we're all about making sure we help founders avoid the number one mistake when building a company, which is building a product without a market need. We try to solve that before we invest. And again, it's rising city founders in North America that are B2B.
So I'd like to ask folks in the VC world, before you got into VC, were you on the operating side? Give our audience a little bit of background on you.
Yeah, I've been in the technology space for a little over 20 years, 25 years. I started out my career as a corporate lawyer when the internet was first commercializing, which was just a wonderful time to be doing it. I didn't really know how to be a lawyer, but I knew how the internet worked. And that gave me a really amazing opportunity. And so I did that for many years, doing it for companies like Salesforce when they were founded, and Alta Vista and Priceline and Yahoo. I went in-house into DoubleClick leading up to the Google acquisition. And then I did take on a number of operating roles after transitioning out of legal roles into operating roles in media space, did it overseas. And then landed back in the United States after 7 years in Asia, in the Valley. And that's where I was blessed to meet my co-founder, Max, at GrowthX.
That's great. Well, to your point, I've seen quite a bit from when the technology is really booming in that internet age to where it is now. So you certainly have a unique perspective. Well, Andrew, before we get into the big idea and you kind of tease it out a little bit in terms of what GrowthX does, however, if our audience, just to get our audience a little bit familiar with you, who is Andrew outside of work? What are the passions, the hobbies, the interests that you have?
Well, for me, number one is my family. My wife and my two daughters, are my entire world. I'm very fortunate to spend a great deal of time with them. And so, frankly, outside of GrowthX and my family, there's not a whole lot of time. Yep. Where I do have some, where I just need to go get myself some to remain centered. I'm long distance running, and I'm also reading fiction. I'm an avid book reader. And so those are two of my really deep passions.
What's the last fiction book you read?
I just finished up the newest book by John Irving, who's one of my favorite authors in the world. I also just finished reading the new Barbara Kingsolver, who's also one of my favorite authors in the world. So those were two of my recent books that I've read. I love historical fiction. It's a great context for me to learn about the things that I should have paid closer attention to in school. But rather than reading straight up history, I love historical fiction.
That's great. And long distance running, I'm assuming that's more, is that a marathon? Are we talking longer than marathon?
You know what? My distance is half marathon. Okay. I have run the New York City Marathon before, and it was really one of my favorite days on earth. But my distance is half marathon. It's actually not that hard. As humans, we're actually built to be able to run that distance. So any human doesn't have to work that hard. I am not an athlete, but I do have extraordinary discipline. And the thing that I have found out relatively later in life is, the 13-mile distance is really my yoga. I am the most relaxed. The voices in my head stop. when I run that kind of distance. And so it really is just a form of relaxation, because I also always do it out in nature. And I think that's very important to be in touch, with Earth, to be around, all the creatures, the trees, the grass, the leaves. It just, for me, it really brings me back to center, puts things into perspective, which hopefully it enables me to perform at a higher capacity and be happy.
That's great. Yeah. I think when people talk about leadership, you need to be fit, both physically and emotionally. And so that's a good example, and spiritually potentially. And that's a good example of, what that does for you. So thanks for sharing a little about who you are and what your passions are. And it's great to hear the family. And then ultimately, when you have the free time outside of that, what that is filled by. So thanks for sharing. It's always fun to hear it.
Thank you for giving me the space to talk about those things that are most important to me. I'm grateful for that.
All right. Like we try to say, we have a value here: do your best, not your all. And the concept is your identity is not in work alone. And while that's a big part of who we are, it's not the only thing. And so it's always fun to have that question. So Andrew, just transitioning now into the big idea. This is not the greatest transition to work, but I think it will work. And so you mentioned a little bit in terms of what GrowthX does. You talked a little bit about your background. And I think it's a really good opportunity for our audience as we talk about that concept of high growth to high scale. Yeah, you really need to have product market fit. And so you have this kind of line: slow is smooth and smooth is fast. And so we're trying to use the word slow down. But so what do you mean by slow is smooth and smooth is fast?
Well, let me first give credit where credit's due. I've now 2 layers have stolen that. The original, that quotation gets the credit is often given to the Navy SEALs. No, I don't know if that's actually true. You look up on the internet, there's not definitive evidence, but it's generally understood that the Navy SEALs came up with that. I stole it from my partner Max, who uses it more often than I do. But it really is the big theme for GrowthX and how we first help and then we invest. And I think, to be perfectly honest, Brendan, it really is meant as a contrast to move fast and break things. We think that that's bad advice. We think that it came from a privileged place at a different time. And so when founders are go to market, which is, where we focus, it's not about go to product, it's go to market. The idea that slow is smooth, smooth is fast is the way you actually find product market fit. And we're not implying that you don't work as hard. We're not saying that you're not going to be grinding around the clock trying to win, especially if you're trying to win in a venture context, which is very big, very fast. So it's not intended to mean relax. You are still running a marathon at a sprint pace. But it really is meant to capture the way in which you go to market more efficiently. You start out systematic and intentional, smooth, because only through smooth do you then get to fast. So that's really what it's intended to imply to our founders.
I love that. And since I started using it, and I will give you credit to then Max and to the SEAL. So it's kind of a snowball effect. Let's break that down a little bit, Andrew. I think it's such a powerful concept. And to your point, it's not saying we don't do certain things. It's just, so you talk about the system and being responsible. So as we break that framework down, let's first start with this big idea, or kind of the first concept within this, which is learning precedes revenue. And so what does that mean from a GrowthX perspective, and how you coach founders or early stage companies on how they should be learning?
Yeah, well, listen, any founder who's out there that does not have product market fit, every dollar of revenue, 90% of the value of that dollar comes in the form of learning, and only 10% of it is the money in your bank. That's really important. Now, that's going to change over time post product market fit. I'm hoping everybody's a lifelong learner, but at some point you're going to see that flip, and 90% of the value of that dollar is going to be the money in your bank, and 10% of it is going to be your learning. But when you're on the path, or trying to get on the path to product market fit, which is, again, it's not revenue. Revenue is one of the indicators of product market fit, but it is not dispositive of product market fit. So we're not just talking about stacking up a certain amount of dollars to the point that you, quote, have product market fit, right? revenue is very important, but it's not just about getting that revenue, especially now, right? Because it needs to be towards profitable revenue, right? It needs to be something that you get better at, that you can systematize, that you can find repeatability. And yes, some people, are going after that holy grail of predictability, if you can really get there. Mm-hmm. But the idea that learning precedes revenue is because not all revenue is created equally. And what we're telling our founders is avoid the most common mistake when going to market, which is just selling to just anybody who's willing to give you their time and potentially their money. That is a highly inefficient way to go. And yes, over the last 10 years, venture capital has subsidized a lot of that bad behavior, but it doesn't mean that it's a good way to go. And now that venture is receding, it's going to even be more important that founders think about of all potential customer types and use cases based on a variety of characteristics and the things that you learn in the process. What are the ones where the sale goes more smoothly, more quickly, more efficiently, where you can learn about it and you can scale it more and get to profitability? And again, this is not an invitation to over-engineer, but if we're willing to admit that not all revenue is created equally, if we're willing to sit back and say of all the potential people who might have the problem that I am looking to solve, because we're being problem focused and not product focused, I think we can all agree that not every human on earth who occupies any role at any company of any size of any place is going to have that same problem, to prioritize it in the same way, to feel it as equally as acutely, to be as actively looking to solve it, to think about what it does for them professionally in the same way, right? And so knowing that, what we're trying to do is dial in as best we can, as efficiently as we can, where, based on a hypothesis, it's going to work just a little bit better than it would otherwise, because that's really where we want to spend more of our dollars and more of our time. And so when we think about learning, when we think about revenue, and this is all pre-product market fit, the thing we like to tell our founders is you're actually not doing any sales until you have product market fit. That's not to say you're not selling your product, but pre-product market fit, you're doing customer development and market development. And only when you have product market fit are you doing sales and marketing. And the difference is that sales and marketing is the pursuit of revenue for the purpose of profit. You have something scalable. You have the playbook. You need the VP of sales, right? Synonymous. Customer development and market development is the pursuit of revenue for the purpose of learning.
I like that sequence, because I was going to say, I think a lot of founders would say, in theory, that's a really nice kind of concept, but I need to survive and I need to generate revenue. And so I liked how you concluded that with that customer development, and you're saying, hey, it doesn't mean you're not selling, but when you think about ultimately when you're trying to create product market fit to drive sustainable revenue, which ultimately impacts profit, there's a distinction there. So I really liked how you summarized that.
And you've also said something very important there, Brendan, if I can hop in. You talked about, listen, I'm a founder, I just need to survive. Hey, listen, I totally get that. I'm in that same exact boat. You have your green zone, your yellow zone, and your red zone. Don't ever get into the red zone. If it starts getting a little bit orange, you have to change your behavior. Venture, when you get people to believe in you and what you're doing and that you can go big fast, is enabling you to be in that green zone, that really special place where you can do what is absolute right for the business long term. But if you're bootstrapping, or if you're at the end of your runway from the venture you've raised and you need to stay on the playing field, by all means, you no longer are just selling to your ideal customer profile. You're selling to everybody who's willing to give you revenue. You're taking on consulting projects. You're doing a side hustle. You're doing whatever you need to stay on the field. I'm really talking about the people that are in that green zone, whether it be 30 days, 90 days, 100 days, their own money, their friends' money, or a venture's money. That's really the place that I'm talking about.
I think it's a good transition. So let's talk about that green zone. So there are kind of 5 steps as it relates to product market fit. I'd love for you to educate. Like, product market fit is a buzzword and people say it a lot, but I like how there's a prescriptive, hey, here are the 5 steps to know that you have it. So to be in the green zone, what does that mean to you?
Well, I mean, listen, being in the green zone is an exercise that I think every founder needs to go through with their family and their co-founders, and it's going to mean something different for different people. Really the best way to measure it is the amount of money you have in the bank divided by the amount you're spending each month. And then how you determine how close to that edge you want to get. Because, we started out this conversation and really what we were talking about was healthy, sustainable, nonviolent, balanced living. Psychologically, people have to be well if they're going to be great founders. Founders don't understand that their wellness is an asset of their company. It's not just important who they are, especially when they take outside capital. So different people have risk tolerances that change. So I think the definition of someone's green is gonna change and vary. But I think to your question about product market fit, it is not a feeling. We think it's disastrous that if you Google what is product market fit, you get things as obnoxious as venture capitalists saying, if you have to ask, you obviously don't have it. Right? Or this is a phrase that gets forced down the throat of founders globally, but nobody is helping them define exactly what it is. And for us, it's 5 objective things, and you go through them step by step. And the no surprise, the first thing, the literally the bedrock of the path to product market fit is what is known as your ideal customer profile. This is not your ideal company profile. This is not a persona, which is a 30,000-foot view. This is, again, as my partner Max likes to say and does so very effectively, we need to get to a person and understand the keystrokes of their professional day so that we can get as empathetic as we possibly can and understand that workflow to then begin seeing if we're a good fit, if they have the problem, and so forth. So that ICP, which we also colloquially refer to as your Mr. or Ms. Right Now, which is different than your Mr. or Mrs. Right, is just a narrow customer type and use case. This is where you admit that not all revenue is created equally, and through a scientific approach that's, more science and less art form, using hypotheses, your intelligence, your intuition, your experience, your relationships, your acumen, you go through a very systematic and intentional process out in the market, just not inside your own startup building or garage, where you begin to test and see of all potential people that have the problem that you can solve now, not your product roadmap, but now, who are the ones that, again, are more aware of the problem. Prioritize it higher, feel it more acutely. The downside of not solving it is larger, right? And in the most practical and tactical terms, take that large surface area, because as a founder, you're excited about all the different ways you can help people and all the different people you can help, and narrow it down to where it's going to work the best right now, which is a combination of your team and your product and the customer, their problems, their workflows, their use cases, and their situation, and make sure you start orienting towards that narrow customer type and use case. It's the most important step any founder can take on the path to product market fit. From there, right, it's a matter of going through the steps to know, as you go through one or a few of these customers, what has the process looked like by which you've acquired this customer and acquired that revenue? Did it follow the similar use case and customer type? Did you notice the patterns emerging about the journey that the customer took from stranger to customer? Did you notice the pattern emerging about how you attracted them into the funnel? the conversational framework that you used and the literal words of the conversational framework to attract them closer, the value proposition and the selling proposition that was really where they bit and where it made sense. Because again, this can't just be random. You have to be thinking about how this can potentially become a pattern and improve over time. Once you've done that a couple of times, you've got to stress test it. What would happen if you took your product away from the customer? If they're not kicking and screaming, then I'd say you're not on the path to product market fit, right? This has to be something that your customer will really kick and scream if you were to take it away. And it can't just be happy customers. Again, being intentional, being scientific, thinking about this as the same as a scientist who's putting chemicals in a petri dish and paying close attention to the outcomes and learning and seeking the truth. You also have to know that and be aware that your customer can express and can communicate in clear terms, what were the objective reasons? Did the value that you promised match up to the value that they received? And did it have that intended impact on their actual professional responsibilities that they will get measured on at the end of the year, quarterly, whatever the case is, right? And then, of course, the last thing is you need it to be economically rational. This isn't where you start saying, hey, do I have a 3-to-1 LTV to CAC ratio? This is the point where you say, hey, do I at least have a 1-to-1 LTV CAC ratio? Because again, at the earliest stages, your revenue can be unprofitable from a dollars and cents perspective, as long as the learning that you're receiving and paying attention to and benefiting from is getting you on the path towards profitability. That's what unprofitable revenue should be used for.
I like that in terms of creating the steps that are objective steps. You kind of talked about the scientific aspects of it and getting rid of the emotion. I like the idea that Mr. Right now, just understanding like the ideal customer versus ideal company and making that very clear, having a repeatable process you talked a little bit about so that you can actually scale it, stress test it, understand this is a nice to have versus a must have for your customer. And then what is the path to getting to that lifetime value? To your point, it doesn't have to be today, but the learnings allow you to take it from that kind of 1-to-1, or maybe it's close to that, to ultimately that desired 3-to-1, which is great. So let's transition a little bit into the last thing, Andrew, as people are saying, okay, those are the steps. Maybe I'm not based off these definitions, I don't think I'm there yet. So what should they do to find and figure out how to capture this product market fit concept?
Well, I mean, I think, certainly they should avail themselves of the continuum of resources that we purposely make available to them. The reason that we do that for founders is because we want to earn the right to invest in them. And it turns out that helping them is an enormously more beneficial form of due diligence than a couple of conversations, a couple of meals, and a top-down total addressable market analysis. And so, I would certainly want to turn on your audience to GrowthX.com and our blog, and of course our main platform, the Revenue Accelerator. But again, what they need to be doing is seeking out all available resources they can to follow a systematic path. The reason that we have a continuum of resources at GrowthX.com is we've sequenced the path to product market fit. And so I'm encouraging your founders to think of this as sales and marketing as less of an art and more of a science. For your product founders. They are going to be naturally better at this because it really does follow an engineering approach. There really is a framework, a system, a lexicon, and a set of tools. But I would say that, again, part of it is also the mindset they bring to the challenge. This is not about scale. This is not about going out and putting together a Marcom tech stack or hiring a VP of sales because we need to fill the top of our funnel. Because if you fill the top of your funnel before you've satisfied and solved for a good signal to noise ratio, you're going to end up filling your funnel with a bunch of noise, which is public enemy number one for a startup.
Mm-hmm.
Every founder listening to us today is also the bouncer at the hottest nightclub in the world. And their nightclub is their calendar. They have to work that velvet rope and be careful about who gets on that calendar. And so spending time defining and running small experiments, this is not an invitation to overthink and over-engineer. This is just an invitation to stop throwing spaghetti at the ceiling and hoping some of it will stick, and start with some of the first principles that form your hypothesis. And again, say of all potential people that potentially have this problem that I could solve, what is logically the characteristics that would lead someone to have this, again, more acutely, more dynamically, more painfully, more currently? And just begin starting running those small experiments. Slow is smooth, smooth is fast. But when you go out and your first instinct is to list build, your first instinct is to, spam strangers with email or phone calls, without truly understanding what that framework is going to be for having the conversation and knowing what you need to learn from them, because you're pursuing revenue and not learning. This is literally the number one reason why over 40% of the companies that fail for this reason. CB Insights and others like to publish it as no market need, but we know that's actually not true. Relatively few founders are failing because of no market need. What they're failing at is running out of money because they've wasted it wandering the desert without any understanding of how to identify the market need. It's out there, but you run out of time wandering the desert looking for it. And so, again, I think the whole approach that pre-product market fit, your activities are oriented towards learning, does not mean you will not get revenue from it. You just need to think of revenue as a completed learning cycle. And the last thing I'll say quickly is, if 90% of your value pre-product market fit of a customer is learning and not revenue, founders need to wake up and realize that closed loss is 90% as valuable as a closed win. All you're missing is the 10% of dollars that would go in your bank. Stop leaving that value on the floor. Stop coming up with excuses and being defensive about why it happened, and ignore the opportunity to learn why someone wasn't a good fit or why they perceived themselves not being a good fit. There's enormous amounts of learning to be had there as well.
I really like that. It reminds me, so Mike Garriott is one of our investors from Garden City, and his saying, or the saying he likes to use, is companies don't die from starvation, they die from indigestion. And it reminds me of what you're just describing is, like you have customer insights, you have customer data with active deals to give you clarity, and that's where you need to focus and not be distracted by all these different noise. To your point, the signal to noise ratio of getting just distracted by the top of the funnel. So I think it's a great.
Right. And I love that quote. We say that founders don't die of starvation, they die of overeating. But I think, indigestion is absolutely the same thing, and I love it. And yeah, I mean, listen, I think it's important, and I invite your founders to think about the frameworks they follow to go to product, and think about the frameworks they can follow to go to market.
Well, you gave me a saying, so I gave you a saying. It's a fair trade. So as we wrap up, Andrew, I really do appreciate the time. I really love these insights. I know our founders are going to benefit from that. If they want to learn more about GrowthX, you mentioned a few resources, but where should they go, or how should they contact you?
Yeah, listen, I appreciate that. They can find us at growthx.com. That's the best way to understand our approach to practicing, venture capital. And that is that we want to earn the right to invest in founders by helping them go to market. That is our approach. There's an enormous amount of resources there. Again, the main one that I mentioned is the only program that's 100% dedicated to helping these founders solve for go to market. And it's called the Revenue Accelerator. We run it quarterly. They can find all the links they want and all the information they need, including access to our full platform if they want to check it out, because it's important to know for your audience, we're not just experts. We've taken our expertise and created a system, a product, and a platform. And then we surround them with expert coaches that work alongside them in the weeds. And that's really where those real revenue results come from. And that's how we earn the right to invest. So yeah, I mean, on LinkedIn, you can find me under Andrew Goldner. You can find us under GrowthX. We would be grateful for the opportunity to hear from anybody in your audience that thinks that we're a good fit. Now we could be helpful to them, and in that process earn the right to invest in them.
Well, I think you will hear from some of our founders as a result of this, or at least I hope you do. And I probably will steal that tagline because I really like that concept of earn the right to invest. Andrew, thank you again. I really do appreciate it, and we'll be in touch.
Thank you, Brendan. I'm, again, super grateful to you and your audience.
Thanks.